Hello there. Welcome to Just the Discs. We talk about Blu-rays here. And today we're talking 4Ks. And we're talking a couple 4Ks from Kino Lorber. One of them from Brian De Palma. And I'll start with that one. We are talking about Dressed to Kill 4K UHD, new Dolby Vision HDR master from a 4K scan of the original camera negative of Brian De Palma's film Dressed to Kill from 1980. I'll start at the top just with talking about the actual scan. Again, I'm no expert when it comes to this stuff. I just can tell you what my untrained eye sees, but the color levels in this transfer are very rich and very nice. The film has a tendency towards a little softness on the lighting, so the brightness is a tiny bit muted, but in a way that makes the black levels richer overall, so I'm definitely a fan of this new transfer. I didn't do a side-by-side with something like this Criterion Blu-ray. Your mileage may vary. Maybe you think it's not worth the upgrade, but it looks very good to me, and it's one of my favorite De Palma films, so I think it's a no-brainer pickup if you're into 4K and De Palma. So if you don't know what Dressed to Kill is about, it is basically about a woman, housewife played by Angie Dickinson, who is horribly murdered, and I won't go into details about that. And her teenage son, played by Keith Gordon, makes it his mission to find his mother's killer with the help of a call girl played by Nancy Allen, who I believe was still the then wife of Brian De Palma. He would follow this with Blowout, which I think is probably his masterpiece, but this is among his best work and showcases all the great things that he does so well, including specific camera techniques, split diopters, overhead shots, just lots of great camera stuff that he's able to do. Tell a story cinematically, basically. So this is a great example of that, and it is got some great Hitchcock energy to it. There's some psycho stuff happening, a little maybe dash a rear window happening, but some other stuff. He's really kind of making it his own. I should also mention that Dennis Franz is in the film as a cop who is trying to figure out who's killed this woman, this housewife, and so he is a fun part of the movie and a fun part of Brian De Palma's stock company. If you're looking for a great conversation about this film, I do recommend checking out the Video Archives podcast covering this and Eyes of Laura Mars, which is part of a series they were doing on American giallo films, basically giallo films made in the United States, or giallo, films that basically feel like giallo and were made in the U.S. And it is Mr. Quentin Tarantino and his co-host Roger Avery, as well as director Eli Roth, talking about not just this film, but De Palma in general. And I think it's a very enlightening discussion, and I do recommend checking it out if you're a fan of the film and or after you watch the film, as it definitely gave me some insights that I hadn't fully, sort of sorted myself before and after seeing this several times. This is a really nice special edition. So you got your slipcase there, and we do have some alternate artwork there. I'm going to flip it over. And then we have a lot of features. Now, this movie has had a lot of releases over the years, so we have a lot of stuff, as you can see, to sort of compile from it. And I'll talk about everything that's included here. There's a commentary by film critic and author Maitland McDonough, and she's great, and it's a really great track. She speaks to the controversy surrounding the film and violence towards women, talks about Angie Dickinson as an actor and star of Policewoman at the time, which is how people would know her, and her character in the film. She speaks about a lot of things. It's just a great track, really well done, and not like sort of overstated, not mile a minute, not going into every single actor, but really making some great observations along the way, and I really enjoyed it. She talks about the relationship between the Keith Gordon character and the Nancy Allen character, which I do think is something that's really great about this movie. You have a teenage kid and a call girl getting together to help solve a murder, and it's really done in a charming, not sleazy way, and that's pretty unique in a lot of aspects in terms of you don't see that kind of relationship done in the film too much, and you certainly don't see it done non-sleazily. And she also talks about the Keith Gordon performance being like pretty solid, and I agree that he's this nerdy know-it-all kid, basically a stand-in for De Palma himself in some ways when he was a kid, the kind of, youth who took apart transistor radios and won science fairs, and that's sort of his a good part of his character, but also a good part of De Palma and what he does, and that also comes into play in the conversation about De Palma and the movie in the Video Archives podcast. Just the idea of De Palma being a Hitchcock acolyte, but also using Hitchcock as a way to sort of see how he did things and take them apart like a transistor radio, the set pieces he did, why they worked, how they worked, and using that as a way in to making his own films. And so it's a really interesting idea, this, and a place to come from, this sort of dissecting, almost standing back from it, looking onto it as a analytical thing, Anyway, another little note, my wife heard some of this track and she liked it more than she's liked a commentary in a long time. She said that Maitland sounds like an intelligent but not pedantic and obnoxious commentator, and she found it very entertaining and enlightening and engaging. She definitely dug it. As a bystander, isn't somebody who's heard some commentaries but doesn't listen to them a lot, she finds some of the other commentators maybe not quite as appealing as this track was to her. So that's a little extra something. So now we got tons of stuff on here. Okay, so I will tell you that there is a bunch from a bunch of different releases, but we have an interview. Sometimes we have multiple interviews from actors here. We have Strictly Business, an interview with Nancy Allen that's about 17 and a half minutes, talking about her experiences on the film. Killer Frames, an interview with associate producer and production manager Fred Caruso, 8 minutes 14 seconds. An Imitation of Life, an interview with actor Keith Gordon, 14 minutes 16 seconds. I think between he and Nancy Allen, they are the most interviewed on this disc, and they get a lot of screen time. There's some repetition between their interviews, but there's definitely some new stuff offered in most of these interviews you're going to hear about. In this one, he talks about getting to work with De Palma first on Home Movies, which is a film he did before this. That was basically a student film that he was making with his students when he was teaching at Sarah Lawrence. And he talks about how while the Peter character that he plays in the film is based on him, De Palma was clear that it wasn't him, not to imitate him, that sort of thing. And talks about his patience as a filmmaker when Keith Gordon was asking questions about the aspects of filmmaking he was fascinated with, because he was, of course, wanting to be a filmmaker and would become a great filmmaker in his own right. And also that the film was originally based on the idea that this was a 10-year-old kid and he came in as like a 17-year-old, and they didn't really adapt the character, but they gave it some more nuance in terms of, they didn't change the lines, but there was a knowing layer added that a 17-year-old would bring to it, and it ultimately ended up working, which is cool. So those are two interviews. I don't know if those are new, but they're the most recent interviews. Then we have interviews that I think track back to the 2012 Arrow Blu-ray. Now, this film's been released by Arrow. It's been released by Criterion. I'll go through that in a minute. And then, of course, there's a special edition DVD that goes way back, and some of that stuff is here as well. But the interviews from the Arrow Blu-ray, we have Symphony of Fear, 2012 interview with producer George Lito, 17 minutes, 37 seconds, talks about his experience with De Palma and this film. Dressed in White, 2012 interview with Angie Dickinson, 29 minutes, 54 seconds, talks about how fondly she remembers this film and how it was one of the films where she felt like she really got to act in it, and talks about, De Palma really wanting her in this sort of Janet Leigh type role, and goes into a lot of detail about it. She's very, like I said, very high on the movie, and very nice to hear her thoughts. in one of the long. I think there might be more talk with her on this disc, but that's one of the most lengthy interviews with her. Dressed in Purple, 2012 interview with Nancy Allen again. This is 23 minutes and 5 seconds, talking about her experiences on the film. Lessons in Filmmaking, 2012 interview with Keith Gordon, 30 minutes and 46 seconds. And this one is the most in-depth interview with him. Again, some repetition, but also more stories, more details from him. And his are my favorite interviews on this disc. I just really dig him as a filmmaker, and I appreciate his interviews and the insights he brings to them from that perspective. So that's a really good one. Those are the interviews from the Arrow Blu-ray. Then we have the special edition DVD features from 2001. We have The Making of Dress to Kill, which is about 43 minutes and 51 seconds. This is made by Laurent Bouzereau, who is a great filmmaker of these documentaries and worked on the Hitchcock DVDs famously, all the documentaries on those films, and has done tons of work with all kinds of filmmakers, a lot of stuff on Spielberg's Blu-rays, and he's just a great guy to bring to these kind of making ofs. He really gets how to tell a story. It's got De Palma, it's got all the major players. That's the other thing that's great about him and the way he does it, is he brings in everybody that he can. And so it's a really great overview of the film and how it got made, and has some great stuff with De Palma. I really dug that. Slashing Dress to Kill, 2001 featurette. That's De Palma talking about what he had to cut from the film to get an R rating for the MPAA, about 9 minutes and 50 seconds. And they show in the next featurette, there's an unrated, R-rated, and TV comparison, about 5 minutes and 14 seconds, where they do a side-by-side of the unrated and R-rated cuts, and then they cut to a separate sequence of the broadcast version, and you get to see the differences between all three. And it's kind of fascinating to see what was cut, you can kind of guess when you watch the unrated version, like this part probably isn't in it, or this part is, or whatever, but it's a nice examination of that. Then you have an appreciation by Keith Gordon, just him talking about the film in general, about 6 minutes and 6 seconds. And then on top of that, we have some archival interviews that go way back to 1980, and they're all audio interviews. We have one with Michael Caine that's 4 minutes 50 seconds. We have one with Angie Dickinson that's 3.5 minutes, and a longer one with Nancy Allen that's 14.5 minutes. Now, if you got the Dress to Kill Criterion Blu-ray, you would have the making of, you would have, let's see here, the differences between the different cuts. What you would be missing is the Noah Baumbach interview conversation with De Palma, and that's pretty great. So I don't know if you want to keep this or not hang on to it. I'm not sure, but I dig that a lot. If you're a fan of the De Palma documentary that he made with Jake Paltrow, this is sort of the beginnings of that, and I love his conversations with De Palma, so that's pretty great. And then you have new interviews with Nancy Allen, producer George Lito, composer Pino Donaggio, and shower scene double Victoria Lynn Johnson, and poster photographer and art director Steven Saidian. So those are what you'll be getting that aren't available on this disc. But nonetheless, a really great 4K release from Kino that looks good. And if you're a De Palma fan, I don't know, I kind of got to recommend it. And then lastly, we have The Usual Suspects, Bryan Singer's film from 1995. This is our slipcase. Do we have alt artwork? Yes, we do. No, we don't. No alternate artwork on this one. And this is just a movie that I was obsessed with in 1995. Now, part of that comes from the fact that Pulp Fiction had come out, and I'm not saying this is like Pulp Fiction or not, whatever, but Pulp Fiction came out, and it rocked my world in a way that I was like, wow, how can a movie be so compelling, so powerful, so up my alley, almost creating a new alley for me in a way that I was like, wow, there are movies like this. This is fascinating. And it kind of put me on the hunt for new movies like that. And again, I'm not saying Usual Suspects is as good as Pulp Fiction, but at the time, it was a movie that was like a Pulp Fiction for me, and then I became totally obsessed with it and really loved it. And so when putting on this new 4K, and by the way, this transfer looks really nice. The color, the brightness, the detail are top-notch. I really, really loved this. This has a new HDR Dolby Vision master from a 4K scan of the original camera negative, color graded and approved by cinematographer Newton Thomas Siegel. And it was a winner of 2 Academy Awards, original screenplay and supporting actor. But anyway, this movie obsessed me at the time, and when I put it on, I was like, oh, I'll just watch a couple minutes of it, or half an hour, just to get a flavor for it. And of course, I ended up watching the whole movie, and that whole obsession reignited with me, and I was like, wow, I still really love this movie. It is one of those movies that has this narrative question: who is Kaiser Soze? And if you haven't seen the movie, you don't know. If you have, you do, and it's fun to watch the movie from that point of view once you have seen it entirely and you have a sense of where it's going. It still works. It's one of those movies that still works despite this twist that I think some people think is pretty dumb, which is totally fine. I can't comment on that, but I will say it still works for me regardless. Bryan Singer's best film. I don't think he's ever done anything better, unfortunately. And it is his second collaboration with screenwriter extraordinaire Christopher McQuarrie, who of course is going on to work with Tom Cruise on the Mission Impossible movies and does a delightful job on those. I think he is one of the great screenwriters we have working today. Just a guy who loves story and loves sort of figuring out how to put story together and make it interesting and stay ahead of the audience and just be really clever and intelligent about it. And I think he's truly one of the greats. And those Mission Impossible movies are a testament to that. But this is just a great neo-noir setup with lots of cool dialogue and, great characters. You have Stephen Baldwin as McManus. You have Benicio del Toro as Fenster. You have Kevin Pollak as Hockney, Gabriel Byrne as Keaton, and Kevin Spacey as Verbal Kint. Then you have, other folks like Chaz Palminteri as Special Agent Kulian, and the supporting cast goes deep, and it's Dan Hedaya, Giancarlo Esposito, Pete Postlethwaite, Peter Green, Paul Bartel shows up in the movie, Susie Amos shows up. It's a really great cast, and even from the beginning, it's fun. It's got the production companies are like Blue Parrot, Bad Hat Harry Productions. And I think Bad Hat Harry is Bryan Singer's production company. I don't know who Blue Parrot is, but both are references to movies. Blue Parrot is Sidney Greenstreet's rival club to the Café Americain in Casablanca. And of course, Bad Hat Harry is something that Roy Scheider's Sheriff Brody character says to this older dude in Jaws at one point. And I love that you have those two references right at the top. But anyway, so you have Chaz Palminteri as this U.S. Customs agent, and he's investigating a stolen truckload full of gun parts, and a bunch of hijackers are hauled in as the usual suspects. These are the 4 or 5 guys I mentioned, and they sort of get together in the holding cell and plan a job together, and that becomes another job, and it kind of goes from there, and it becomes more and more complicated, and there's actually multiple layers of jobs and people that are potentially involved and maybe double-crossing each other, and it's just, like I said, it's a great neo-noir setup, and you've got, for me, Stephen Baldwin doing his best performance, Kevin Pollak probably his best, although I think he's really great in Deterrence. That's a great movie too. But then, Benicio del Toro, not the character they had in mind, or not the type of guy they had in mind for the character of Fenster, and he just owns that role. And Gabriel Byrne's incredible. Spacey's good too. So it's a really great ensemble piece, and like I said, a great mystery story, great hard-boiled noir in terms of like the jobs that they're pulling and where it's going. Overall, just has a general noir malaise that I am totally a fan of. And again, in rewatching it this time, I was like, this still works for me. And so I don't know, I was just really excited that this got a nice 4K release. The features, I think, are mostly port overs. Pretty sure they're all port overs. You have an audio commentary from Bryan Singer and Christopher McQuarrie, and they go way back. They had worked together previously on Public Access, which is another film that's a little harder to see now. It's okay. It's not nearly the film that Usual Suspects is, but apparently they had gone to high school together, so they just really had a long history. You also have an audio. I mean, that's just a great track, just to hear them talk about the movie, different things that they chose to do or didn't choose to do, just background stories. All of it's really, really solid commentary. I really enjoyed it. Basically, any commentary where Macquarie's involved, I've found to be pretty engaging and enjoyable. There's also a commentary by editor/composer John Ottman, who was, I guess, mostly an editor and started composing with Bryan Singer on Public Access, and then really launched his career from Usual Suspects. He does a really nice score for this one. So you have his commentary there as well. You have something called The Devil in the Details, which is an interview with Newton Thomas Sigel, the cinematographer, and he talks about achieving the look of the film at about 16 and a half minutes. An interview with John Ottman again. Jeff Bond of Film Score Monthly talks to Ottman about how he used the film to launch his career as a composer. Again, though he had composed music for Public Access. So that's a really neat interview. 17 minutes, 44 seconds. Pursuing the Suspects. Now, this is two parts of basically a making of. 24:58 on this one, almost 25 minutes, where you have Macquarie, the actors, Bryan Singer, talking about the movie, how it came to be, all that. Really cool interviews. And then you have Doing Time with the Suspects featurette, which is another 26 minutes, 47 seconds. So, in the 50-plus minute range of a making of featurette for this, which is great. Again, all the principals are involved in both these, and it's really solid making of documentary. Then you have Kaiser Soze Lie or Legend, 18-minute and a half piece about that character and such. Heisting Cans with Usual Suspects featurette, only about 4 minutes and 14 seconds, but talking about the premiere of the film at Cannes. Original EPK making of, 6 minutes, 40 seconds. Deleted scenes with John Ottman hosting. I want to say there's 4 or 5 deleted scenes. It's about 9.5 minutes. Gag reel with Bryan Singer, 7 minutes and 11 seconds. And then interview outtakes with Chaz Palminteri, Stephen Baldwin, Kevin Pollak, Benicio del Toro, and Bryan Singer, about 3 minutes. But it's pretty funny just to see the sort of short end, the beginnings and the ends of interviews, little bits that were cut out, just silly stuff. It's enjoyable, almost like another gag reel. But overall, really nice 4K release. I think a release that fans will be pleased with, and I know I was pleased with. And again, it sort of reignited and rekindled my love of this film. So, so that's Dressed to Kill on 4K and The Usual Suspects on 4K from Kino. Definitely check them out. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.